Hi, I'm Graham from Blackmagic Design. I've got a few nice updates today. It's all about ATEM Mini Pro really. It's been a few months since we shipped ATEM Mini Pro. You know, it's got a lot of power. It's a very powerful switcher. So today is sort of like building on that. You know, the update we're going to talk about today is really some advanced workflows, and we really want to show you what ATEM Mini Pro can do. It's a very powerful, so we can think we can do a lot more with it. Now, one of the things that it does is it builds in streaming. You know, it's got a hardware streaming engine. It's broadcast quality. You know, it's not a simple computer processing type streaming engine. It's actually a hardware streaming engine, so you don't get drop frames. You get better quality, and there's no tearing. You know, like you don't get that weird tearing where it's trying to synchronize the software with the external hardware. So we thought, what else can we do with this? You know, how can we take advantage of the powerful streaming engine built into ATEM Mini Pro? And we realized that what you could do is you could stream to yourself, or you could stream to anyone really. Now at the moment we can stream to YouTube and Facebook and people like that, but what about if you could stream to anyone? And so we thought about that and we created a new product. Now the new product's called ATEM Streaming Bridge, and what it does, it converts the video stream from ATEM Mini Pro to HDMI or SDI video. Now what that means is ATEM Mini Pro can stream to this box. So what I'll do, let me bring it out and I'll show you. Here it is here. Got myself in a tangle of cables. So there it is there. I'll just put it down if you can get a close-up of that. Now that's pretty much all it is. It's essentially a converter. Now I'll show you the connections. You can see on, well actually let me tilt it around if you've got a shot of that I can get it for you. See over the side there we've got the Ethernet connector. We've also got both an SDI and an analog reference input, so you can reference the output. And on the output, I'll swing it around there, we've got HDMI and 2 SDI outputs, 3G SDI outputs. Now you can use it in a bunch of different ways. Now I think one of the most simplest ways to use it is to use it in sort of a direct connection to the switcher. So you can use it like as a video link, and so you can just take an Ethernet cable from the switcher and plug it straight into the converter. Now that's really good in a building, like if you want to use the building's network cables, you might be in one part of the building and you've got network infrastructure in the building, and so you can patch links between the different parts of the building. It's the same direct cable. It's basically a direct cable. You don't need to do any settings. It just works. You just plug it point to point and it'll do that. Now it knows it's a direct connection, so it can take care of everything for you. So I'll actually show you that because I've got it set up here to let you see that. So I'll grab an Ethernet cable, which I've got here, and there's my converter. So I'll plug in my Ethernet cable. Let me put it flat on the desk here. So this is the direct connection. And let me plug into the ATEM Mini Pro there. Now it's established a connection, and I've got this television here, and I've got a HDMI connection on that, so I'll plug that in as well. And there you go there. So now I've plugged in my network cable, which is directly connected from the ATEM Mini Pro to the converter, and then from the ATEM Streaming Bridge I've got it into this monitor here. Now I'm using a TV here, but you could use this could be a video projector up on the roof, or it could be, you know, any kind of large display anywhere in your building. Now all I need to do is make this work is just push the start streaming button. There it is there, and you can see the pictures come up, and it's pretty easy. So as I switch between sources, you can see the latency is also pretty low as well. So it's pretty cool. Now this streaming data is coming from this ATEM Mini Pro through the cable as compressed H.264 video, and then it's being decoded by this box and turning it back into video. So it's pretty simple. You know, the program output is actually being encoded just like you'd stream if you're streaming through the internet, and it's going through the network cable to the converter where it decodes it. Those can be anywhere in your building. So that takes care of creating a sort of essentially video link. It's like an IP solution. That's a bit like an IP video solution, but that's the most basic way of using it. Like, you know, when you get this, you can just plug it in and it works. It's set up for that. But you can also use it via the building's network. So what this allows you to do is you can connect to more than one. You might have multiple stream bridges through your network in your building, and you can connect more than one. So what that means is you can then select in the ATEM software which one you want to connect to. You can also customize the names in the boxes. We've got a utility software. You can plug into this with USB. You can customize the names so you can actually don't get confused about which one's which. Now I have a streaming bridge on the monitor behind me. I need to plug in the ATEM Mini Pro into the network to actually show you that working, but the monitor behind me has actually got a streaming bridge connected to it. So I'll unplug this, and I'll plug in. I've got a network cable here that'll plug this ATEM Mini Pro into the network of the studio here. So I'll turn off my streaming. Now when I plug this in, what I've actually now done is connected it to the network in the building. Now the ATEM Mini Pro can see all the streaming bridges in the network. So if I go across to the ATEM software control, I can actually show you how that works. So if I go across here, it's in the same, so if you can switch to the UI over here, you can see it's the same streaming palette that you'd use for streaming, but except that when I click on the platform, it's now added the studio monitor selection here. And I can also set the quality that I want. I can just use Hyperdeck High, which is the highest quality you can do, because it's a network, so you don't really have to worry about choosing a lower compression rate. So what this means is that I can now, I've found the ATEM streaming bridge on the network, and now the ATEM Mini Pro knows that it can stream to it. So all I have to do is start streaming. So I just push the on air button, or I can do that from here. And now if I come across here and I'm switching, I can see it over on the monitor, and that's via the network. So you could have a lot of different streaming bridges on the network if you wanted to. You know, you could put them in presentation rooms. Now you can actually, in the utility, you can set a password. A password on streaming products is actually called a streaming key, but you can do that. So what that means is that, you know, like imagine if you had road connections connecting in. Imagine how that could go horribly wrong in a school or somewhere like that, where everyone would just start streaming into the streaming bridge. So we've got a password in there. It's called a streaming key, so you can set that through the software. So at the moment I just connected straight to that streaming bridge on the back monitor wall, but you can do that with a password if you need to. So I'd be the only person that would know the password or the streaming key, and I'd be the only one that can connect to that. Now because ATEM Mini Pro is using the streaming engine for this, and the streaming engine is obviously designed for internet streaming, it means we can also do this through the internet. So this is quite powerful because ATEM Mini Pro uses H.264 compression. It's very low data rate and it's very high quality. So what that means, you can connect on ATEM Mini streaming, well, sorry, an ATEM streaming bridge from anywhere in the world. So the question, of course, then is how does that work? Because that's a little bit more tricky to set up. I mean, it's a very different situation than plugging it on the network and finding it. You've got to find it over the internet. So I think to understand how you make this work through the internet, it really pays to look at it from the ATEM streaming bridge's perspective. What's the world look like from this converter's point of view? Now the ATEM Mini Pro has to find it on the internet to be able to stream to it. So this has to find that, and that's going to be somewhere in the internet. It could be anywhere. It could be in different countries. So how do you tell the ATEM Mini Pro where to send its video stream to get to that box when it's actually on the internet? That's quite tricky. No one, like you don't want to really, if you're a broadcaster using one of these, you don't want to try and explain network settings to someone over the phone. Like it's going to be overly complicated. So I've got a utility, we've got a utility that makes this really easy to set up. We can set it up via USB. So let me show you, and I'll bring out the laptop and let you see. So first I've got to plug my laptop into this streaming bridge. So actually the first thing I need to do is actually I've got to plug the ATEM streaming bridge into the internet. So I've got a box over there. If you can see that box next to the monitor, that's actually an internet interface. So when I connect to that, I'll be actually connected to the internet. So let me plug it in. I've got a cable here that I can plug in, and then I can plug this over here. I'll move that over there. So now what that's done is it's now connected the ATEM streaming bridge onto the internet. Now anyone in the world could actually find this and connect to it. Of course you've got to know where it is, but at the moment now it's sitting there connected to the internet ready to receive a stream. So what we need to do is we need to update its settings to make sure that it, well actually we've got to make sure that the settings are set so it actually can do all its network things, but basically it's on the internet now. So what I'll do is I'll bring out the laptop and I'll plug it in and I'll show you how that works. So I've got a laptop here with the ATEM software utility on it. To let you see it so we can get the switcher guys to switch to this, what I'll do is I'll plug in a video cable so you can see the laptop. That should log in, there it is. So you should be able to cut to that now and get a view of that. And what I need to do is plug a USB cable from the streaming bridge into the laptop. So let me do that now. So my USB is on the side, it's USB-C. I plug into there. So now the laptop can see the streaming bridge and I can open up the utility. I'll get rid of that from our earlier version. So there's the streaming bridge. The utility now is talking to the streaming bridge. So now if I go into the streaming bridge, I can see all my network settings here. Now I just need to select internet, and there's all my settings. And it's actually also gone off and checked the internet to find out if it can actually connect or not. Now we've already set all the internet settings here for this demo. I didn't really want to go through and type in a bunch of IP addresses and stuff, but that's generally, you know, people who are using this product will know how to set up the IP addresses and stuff to be able to see it on the internet. It'll also help get through your firewalls and things. Now, that button, I can also push this button here, it'll go out and check the internet to see if it's actually managed to get through the switch, the local internet connection, so that makes it setting up a lot easier. Now what I need to do is, now I've checked the internet, I know it's connected, it says it has. What I need to do is now I need to work out, how does ATEM Mini Pro find this converter? How do you tell ATEM Mini Pro what to do? Like, we need to tell it, it's too complicated to pass network settings, to creators who are using ATEM Mini Pro based studios. It's too hard to sort of call on the phone and call them and tell them network settings over the phone. So we have a solution for that. We have a way of sorting this out. This utility allows us to bundle up all the settings for the ATEM streaming bridge and email them to an ATEM Mini Pro customer. So let me show you how that works. Now if you see over here, if I select the ATEM Mini Pro, it comes up with some settings here, and I can also put in, let's put in a TV station name. Here's the settings that's brought across, and I can also set the quality as well, which is pretty nice. So I'll set streaming high because we're going to go through the internet. Now, broadcasters have full control over this allows the broadcaster to have full control over the ATEM Mini. So what you're really doing here is you're using this utility to set up your ATEM Mini Pro, your ATEM streaming bridge, but you're also using the utility to set up the ATEM Mini Pro that'll be streaming to this. So all we need to do is save the settings. We can save the ATEM Mini Pro settings into a file. So if I go in here and push this button, I can go across here and I'll call it TV 6. I'll save it on my desktop. And there it is. Now what it's done is, if you look at the desktop, it's basically bundled all the settings for the ATEM Mini Pro as a service and has put them on the desktop as a file. So all I need to do is come along and get a flash drive. I'll unplug this. I'll plug a flash drive in so I can copy the settings across. So I've got my flash drive plugged in. There it is there, and I'll just take those settings and copy them to the flash drive. There they are. Now if I come across here, I can plug my flash drive in. Now I'm going to copy the settings to the computer. There they are, and I'll copy that across. Now all I need to do is I need to go to the, now I need to load these settings into the ATEM Mini Pro so I can use it as a service. So I just come across to the stream settings and import the streaming settings. Go to my desktop, load them. Okay, so now it's loaded the streaming settings into the menu here. So all I have to do is select it. So if I come down to the platform menu here, there it is. There's my TV station I just created. And now what I can do is I can just simply go on air. And now it's gone and found the ATEM streaming bridge on the internet, and it's now streaming to it. So I can come along here. What I'll do is I'll let me get rid of this computer because I don't need this anymore. And here's my ATEM Mini Pro. It's streaming through the internet, out through the internet back to the internet box here into this converter, and I can switch between the sources. And you can see it's pretty low latency considering it's going through the internet. So you can see it's much better quality than Skype or Zoom. You can control the quality setting actually, so you can set it to whatever you like. Now this allows you to live stream to broadcasters, so it'd be pretty cool. You can do interviews without the Skype logo. I see that all the time these days, and so you don't have any logos or anything like that. And you can stream from one ATEM Mini Pro to other ATEM Minis, so that's pretty cool. You can stream to remote digital signage. So I think it'll be really exciting what people do with this. I think it's going to be fantastic. Now it's going to be available in a few weeks' time. We're still finishing off some of the software, so sometime in August. Now the ATEM streaming bridge will be $245, excluding duty. Some countries add duty. So we think it'll be really great for connecting the big monitors on your local network, or even video projectors in public spaces. Like I was at a convention centre recently and they had a bunch of different studios who wanted to stream to a video projector in a public space. It'd be fantastic for that. You could stream a whole bunch of switches in different areas to another ATEM Mini Pro and then do the master control through the ATEM Mini Pro, then out to another streaming bridge. So it'd be pretty cool. You can create networks of streaming bridges. We also think it'd be really nice because ATEM Mini Pro customers can stream to broadcasters. So various blog studios could actually be streaming to their local broadcasters or broadcasters anywhere in the world. So I think it's going to be really exciting seeing what kind of new workflows people develop. We've all been streaming to each other's houses as we've been testing it. It's been really funny watching suddenly pictures appear in each other's houses. That's probably why it's important to have the streaming key capability so you can restrict that. Okay, so I think the ATEM streaming bridge will be really exciting. Now the next thing I wanted to talk about is another professional workflow. ATEM Mini is a powerful switcher, but it's a HDMI based, so it's harder for some workflows some of these workflows, because of the HDMI connections, can be a little tricky. We have a bunch of really affordable SDI switches that can be expanded because SDI is really easy to expand. You can add external recorders, but one of the big things that's harder for ATEM Mini, because it's HDMI based, is professional switches. You can put recorders on the inputs for recording the inputs for editing later. Now each input is recorded to a separate video file. The professionals call it ISO recording, but you're really just isolating the inputs as a separate recording. Now the big switches, we can do it with hyperdeck recorders, so you can just stack hyperdeck recorders, but that adds a lot of extra cost because each input needs a recorder and it really adds up. An ATEM Mini is supposed to be an affordable switcher, which it is, and it's very powerful, but we have to be careful about sort of adding external devices because it adds cost. But recording the inputs is really useful. Recording those isolated inputs or ISO inputs is really useful. So the big question we thought about was, how can we do this without adding thousands of dollars to the cost? How do we do it without also adding big racks of equipment? This is really portable. You don't want to be adding sort of big racks of equipment. So we have a new model. It's called ATEM Mini Pro ISO. And what we've done is we've built 5 separate recorders inside the switcher. Now ISO, as I mentioned, ISO stands for isolated input recording. That's why we've called it ATEM Mini Pro ISO. It's an ATEM Mini Pro with the ISO feature. So that's how we've sort of named it. Now let me show you the new model. I'll bring it out. Now you can see it there. I can get a close-up of that. Now it's got the same buttons as the ATEM Mini Pro, so it's almost identical on the outside. And you can see there, it looks really similar on the front. I think it's actually exactly the same on the front. You can't really tell, apart from the label, of course. Now if I show you around the back, you can see the rear connectors. So you can see it's the same there as well. It's the same connectors. The design inside is very different internally, of course. The electronics are very different, but on the outside, it's almost basically it's identical. Now you can see along the back there on the connections, you see there's a power connector. There's an Ethernet connector, which is where your streaming video comes out. There's USB, which is where you plug your disc in. In this case, that's where you put 5 streams of recording down, or 1 stream, depending how you set it. There's the HDMI output there, which we've got the multi-view on. And we've also got 4 HDMI inputs and the extra analog mic inputs. Now the big difference, of course, is now it can record up to 5 streams on the same USB disc that you plug into the back of that USB. And it always records the program master, of course, but it also now records each video input as a separate video file. So it's a separate video file for each input. So you get everything untouched from all the sources and allows you to completely re-edit your video after a live event, which is a really powerful thing to do. So let me change the switcher over and I'll plug this guy in and then I'll show you how it works. So I'll come along here and I'll plug my power in. And I'll screw it up. I'll plug my network in. Oops. I'll plug all my HDMIs. Times like this, I wish it didn't have as many inputs because it would be easy to plug in. So many. There we are, we're all plugged in and powered up. I'll move this out of the way. Okay, so I'll just place it there. So get a nice shot on the overhead camera. I've got a camera up on the rigging there so you can get an overhead shot so you can see me using it. Now, as I was mentioning before, it does a lot more than just record each video input. Now, it still records the program file, so you still get the master file, but you get all the input files as well. So that's 5 separate recorded video files in total. Now it also records all the audio inputs to broadcast WAV files. Now there's a really powerful audio mixer in here, but what it means is you can get those audio files into a full audio mix later. Now the audio files are recorded raw without any processing. So like the audio mixer inside the switcher here has got a 6-band parametric EQ, it's got compressor limiter, noise gate, things like that. You don't get any of that applied to those raw files. They're the original raw files, which means you can do a complete new audio mix later. So that's really nice. The other thing it can do though, and this is probably the most important feature, apart from the ISO video files of course, is it records a full DaVinci Resolve project. So as you switch, it actually builds up a DaVinci Resolve project in real time. Now that's all happening in there, like it's basically building that project and storing on the disk it's plugged in. So when you've finished your live event, you can just double click the project and open it up and you get the full edit opened up in DaVinci Resolve. So we think that that's a game changer. It's going to be really exciting. Now you get most of the switcher features are saved in that file. So cutting between cameras is supported, mixing between cameras. Obviously a mix in live switches is called a dissolve in the editing world. There's a slight difference in the name terminology there. It also supports the ATEM media pool. So if you use a still as a graphic, it'll save it. So it'll pull it out of the medium pool and put that onto the drive as well, and it puts it in the ISO folder. So that means you can also support titles with an alpha channel, and it also supports fade to black. Now one of the other things it does is it's got an append feature. So if you stop because you make a mistake, and you're actually, like a lot of times people aren't live streaming, of course, they're using a switcher to create a live program. So if you working away and you realise you kind of made a boo-boo, you can stop and then get yourself sorted out. And when you start again, it'll append to the end of the project file. So you can just, again, open the whole thing up and you'll see it all appear. So it allows you can sort of recover from making mistakes and keep going. So we think that's a really nice feature as well. So let me show you how this works. Now what I need to do is I need to plug in a USB disk. Now I've got my USB disk over here, so I'll eject it from the computer so I can get the disk. So I'll get rid of that and I can get my disk. And I've got another USB cable here. So I'll plug in my USB disk. And this is the same as what you do for an ATEM Mini Pro. You just plug in a flash drive or into the back into the USB port. So there it is there. Now that's plugged in. Now all I need to do is do a simple recording, and I can show you really how easy this is, but I do have to enable the ISO recording, because if I just use it straight out, it'll just record a master file, it won't record all the ISO stuff. So let me show you over on the ATEM software control how you do that. So if I come over here, now I'll close my streaming settings because I had them open from before. So I go into my record palette and I've got a file here, I'll just call it demo, and this is the setting you want down here. It says ISO record all inputs, and that's really all you have to do. You just enable that and that's the feature. So really it's all you need to do. It's quite simple. Now there is a couple of things we probably need to set up, because I've just plugged this switch and I noticed the cameras are wrong. So the first thing was load some demo media in so we can show you the media pool, and so we'll do that. So I'll go across to the media pool and I'll drag in a still frame and a lower third title. This one's got an alpha channel on it. In fact, I'll make the still frame my source picture. There it is there. And the other thing I need to do is I need to load my, I've got a slideshow coming in as my fourth input, so I'll make that go full screen. Now I'm just using a slideshow over here. If you can see on the back wall, there's a computer feeding that. So I'll just come over here and I'll set that to full screen. There's my chocolate consumption graph. Now what I have is, to explain my setup here before I start recording, one of the inputs is the slides, which I have on the back over there, and I've got 3 pocket cameras over here next to the main cameras that we're using for the video that's going into the truck. Now one of the things that you'll notice, because we plugged the switcher in, we actually need to load the color corrections for those cameras. So what I'll do is I'll restore the camera color settings. So if I go back over to the user interface over here, I can go restore. I've got the previous switcher settings here. Now I'll turn everything off. It also was an ATEM Mini Pro settings file, so I'm actually copying the color corrections from the cameras across to the ATEM Mini Pro ISO. So I'll restore the camera settings and you'll see them now. If you can cut to the multi-view, you can actually see it loading all the camera settings. So there they all go. Pop, pop, pop. And now you've got all the color grades loaded. So if I go back to the main switcher page, I've got everything set up. I've got my some media loaded, I've got my cameras restored, and I've got my slideshow coming in. So I've got 3 pocket cameras, a pocket camera 4Ks actually, and I've got a slideshow behind me. So I've got everything I need to go. I can start recording. So all I need to do is start recording on the front. Oops, sorry, that's the streaming. Just stream to the internet. So I'll start recording. I've got to push the right button. So there we are. Now it's not just recording the single program file now. If I had that setting off, it would just be recording the program file like the current ATEM Mini Pro does. But what it's doing now is it's recording a whole folder of content. So it puts everything in a folder. So instead of a single file, a program file, it creates a folder and it puts everything in it. Now it includes the program file, of course, it's in the folder. But it's also all the edit resources you need. So what I'll do is I'll do some editing here. I'll do some mixing, and then we can see what that looks like. So I'll do some cuts. So I'll cut between the cameras. I've got a multi-view over there so I can see what I'm doing. So here's my cutting between cameras. Now I'll do some mixing. So I'll change to auto, and I've got that set. So I'll do some transitions to different cameras. There I go there. Now I'll cut to a still frame actually. So I'll cut, there's my still frame. So I've got that as a program view. Now that still, what it's just done, now I've selected that still, it's going to be automatically loaded into the folder on the disk. So I've got that media pool graphic because I've used it. What I'll do is I'll crossfade back out to a camera. Now what I'll do is let's load a title. Let's use the other still frame that I've got in the media pool for a title. Now to do that I've got to set the downstream key and change the media pool image. So let me go back over to the user interface over here. What I'll do is I'll go to the media pool. I want to use this graphic now, so I'll drag that down to make that my graphic. Go back to the switcher. I need to change to my palettes and go to the downstream keyer. And that's already set, so that's good. So now I can just turn that on air. There it is. Now what I'm doing is I'm creating in the downstream keyer, I'm getting that graphic and it's doing an alpha key of the graphic over the program video. And then at the end, if I'm doing this as a live event, I can now fade to black. And that'll fade everything off. So now I've done like a simple mini sort of live program. A pretty boring one, but you can see how it works. So I'll stop recording, and there's my project. Now what I'll do is I'll move this disk across to the Mac, and we'll open it up and we'll have a look to see what it's recorded. So in fact I'll just unplug it there. I've got a different cable over here so I don't have to reach around the back. So let's have a look. So I'll minimize the computer here, because now what we need to do is have a look in the folder. So if you can switch across. There's my demo folder, there's my previous settings from before. Now you can see what's in here. There's a bunch of things in here. Now you can see I've got the program file, of course. There's my program view. And there was what I just did. So I've got that, of course. But I've also got this ISO folder. So if I look inside the ISO files, you can see there's my 4 ISO views. So there's my, well, that's just the graph, so that's probably the most boring view. But if I look at this one, you can see it's just the input file. There's nothing else in there. And I've also got my media. So I use the 2 graphics, and it saved those 2 graphics, so there they are. Now, what's really nice about all these files is because the cameras have got color graders in them, all the files recorded here have got color grades on them, so they all look good. So each ISO file's got color grades as well as the program, of course. Now, remember before I mentioned that we've got audio files. If I go across here, you can see my audio files. I've got the 4 inputs, and I've also got the 2 microphone sources there as well. So that's everything. Now, what's really exciting now is the DaVinci file. So what I can do is I can open up the DaVinci project, and you can see it open up. Let me just, well, I just clicked that. In fact, I minimized DaVinci so I didn't have to wait for it to load, so I'll just bring it up here. So it'll load the DaVinci project in. There it is, simple as that. So you can see I've got the whole thing here. Now, if you haven't seen the DaVinci Resolve cut page before, I think it's probably worth just showing you around what the page looks like. So I'll just give you a quick UI. So over the left here is my media. So you can see I've got my project here. And I've got some folders. There's my ISO files, are all in there, organized for me. It's organized everything for me. I've got the viewer over here, so that's all pretty simple. You know, it all works very similar. And I can change the size of that as well if I want to change the size. Now, I can change between the clips and the timeline. If I'm working on a single clip, here's my clip there, or I can change the timeline, so you can just switch backwards and forwards. So a single viewer in the cut page switches between the viewer and the clips, so it's all simple. And the reason we did that is so we can use smaller resolution screens, so that's pretty nice. And you can switch the viewer between them. But we also have this other feature called the source tape. We did a lot of things in the cut page to make editing much faster. So if you look over here, we've got the single clip view and we've got the timeline view. You can switch them up here. We've also got this other thing called the source tape. I need to go back up to the master to get everything. But what it's actually done is it's taken each one of my ISO files and it's lined them one after the other. Now this is not quite the right type of job for the source tape, but if you're editing a lot of content, the source tape gives you a way of visually browsing up and down all your content, and then you can just pick in and out points and drop them down, so it's really nice. Now the timelines, you notice that's also a bit different. We have 2 timelines in DaVinci Resolve, the cut page. We have an upper timeline and a lower timeline. Now the upper timeline, it's not just a scroll bar. You can click clips in here and you can trim in there. What it is, it's a view of the entire edit, whereas the bottom part is a view of part of the edit. Now the reason we did dual timelines is on the edit page we have these automatic trim tools. So as you move the trim tool around, if I go to over here, as I move the tool around, you can see it changes the trim tools automatically. The problem, of course, is you've got to be zoomed in enough to be able to use them. So in the cut page we have 2 timelines, so we've always got a fixed zoom level at the bottom, and at the top we have a full view of the entire edit, so you can see down here. Now what's really nice about that is at least you can sort of see both, and you can even drag clips between them, everything like that, so it's pretty cool. Now you can import media over here, you can import files or folders. You can also do a quick export over here to export out your final job. So it's very easy to use this. You can see the cut page isn't that hard. And scrolling the timeline, on the upper timeline you click on the ruler, and the bottom timeline you click on the ruler or the thumb. So it's all pretty easy. Now what's exciting is let's have a look to see what's been imported from the ATEM Mini Pro, because we've got the whole thing here. So you can tell when we did the timeline, well actually I'll play it. So this is the edit that we did. We were cutting cameras first, so you can see all the cuts as I was cutting. Then we got down the timeline a little bit and we got into the dissolves, and we were then doing dissolves. So you can see if I come over here, you can see all those dissolves there that I applied. And you can actually, of course, because I was filming myself doing it, you can actually see me pushing the buttons in the video itself. Then we went down and we had a still frame, which is there. That's where we had our still frame from the media pool. So we cut to that. And then as we went down the timeline, we put our alpha channel graphic in, and you can see that's layered up on the second layer. And then down the end here is where we did our fade to black, so you can see that there. Now the big question is, what does that mean? So the way this is really organised is layer 1, which is the layer down here, that's where all the video edits are. We've placed all the video edits along with layer 1, all the cuts and dissolves is all there. Now layer 2, the green layer down the bottom is actually the audio track, as you can see that there. That's the audio track. Now layer 2 is where we put the titles with an alpha channel. So we put that up on layer 2 so it overlays on layer 1, and that's where we put all the downstream keyer titles that you put in the downstream keyer. And then layer 3 at the very end, it's our fade to black layer. That's where we basically fade to black, and it sits on top of everything because it affects the entire switcher. Fade to black is at the end of the processing on the switcher, so it's the last thing that gets put on. So you make sure that all the layers get faded off at the same time, and that's what really happens at the end of a program when you want everything just to go to black. You don't want a random title or something staying up there. That's why it's on the top layer in the edit, because it affects all the layers below it, and we just basically fade a black slug over the top, and that's then has the same processing effect. Now what I think is really interesting is it's amazing how quickly you can build up hundreds of edits. It's really quite exciting. Like when you're really punching away at the front, you build up a lot of edits really fast. What I'll do is actually let me trim a few edits so I can show you how this works. So if I come along here and go to here, say if you're doing a bunch of fast-paced edits and you've got people talking, like maybe you're doing an interview and a whole bunch of people are arguing, and that seems to be fairly common these days. So you've got a whole bunch of people debating a topic and they're all talking to each other. It can be hard with a fast-paced interview for the switcher guy to keep up, because people start talking and then he's got to switch to them. So you tend to find the edits actually lag the action. What we really want to do is move the edits to before the action, so that, and you can do that with editing. I mean, with live production it pretty much streams like that, but if you're loading it into the editing software here, you can move the edits to before the person looks at the camera or the person starts talking, and that gives you a whole different creative feel. It's really quite nice. So let me show you how to trim. So I've got the trim tool down here, and all I really need to do is just roll along and trim. So I could just slide these edit points just back to before a person sort of starts talking, and it would, if you went through and did all of those and then just did a quick export, that would completely transform how it feels and the whole vibe of the interview, because now you're sort of catching people before they start talking, because of course you've got the time laid out on the timeline here, so it's exciting. Now the other thing you can do is you can change cuts to dissolves. Like I can go along here. Now I cut that on, I could probably change that to dissolve. Now in DaVinci you can just turn dissolves on and off. We've got this really fast way of doing it in the cut page. So I can just turn a dissolve on there, and it's just added this dissolve. There it is there. So now when I play through that, I've added a dissolve. That's all nice. Now what that means is that often with low bandwidth links, a lot of people like only to stream with cuts. What this means you can do is you can stream with cuts, and then you could add the dissolves later and upload with dissolves. So it's really nice. Now one nice thing about the cut page is it's really fast. You don't need in and out points. So you'll notice the way I did that is I didn't put any in point on the timeline. You got this little indicator here, and it's worth just pointing that out. That's called a smart indicator. So if I turn off the dissolve, I can turn it on and off, and it knows what to do, because one of the problems we felt is, why do you always have to go to the timeline instead of an in point? It's really so boring, especially if you're using the source tape up on the viewer. You just want to be throwing edits down in the timeline as you identify the bits you want. You mark the in and out points on the viewer, but you just want to be throwing stuff in the timeline. And same with putting dissolves on. You can scroll along, and pretty much where the smart indicator moves, you can see it'll jump, particularly around here where I've got a bunch of edits. You can see the smart indicator moving around here, see to the different edit points. So if I decided I wanted to change one of those into a dissolve, some of my points are really small, but if I wanted to put a dissolve there, you can pretty much just roll along here, and the smarter indicator will show you where that dissolve is going to be placed or where it's going to be removed. So you can just drop dissolves. You can just scroll along and go dissolve, 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 and just add them in. So it's really fast. Now all the ISO files have timecode, so they're all synchronized. So what that means, it's really simple to replace shots. So now all the files also have camera numbers. So they got the camera numbers from the HDMI inputs. So input 1 is camera 1, input 2 is camera 2. So what that means is, because all the files have got timecode and they've all got camera numbers, we can use the sync bin feature in DaVinci Resolve's cut page to replace shots. So maybe you set the wrong camera, you might have been switching away and you go, oops, I switched the wrong camera and that went out. No problem, we can fix it in here. You can just go to the sync bin and change that. So let me show you how that works. So I'll go up here, here's the sync bin feature here, so I just select that. Now you can see what it's done. The sync bin is a bit like an assistant editor. What it does, it goes off and finds all the shots that'll synchronize to this point in the timeline. So you could have thousands of shots, it doesn't care, it's going to go through and find just the shots that match this point in the timeline, and it's going to put them up in a multi-view up in here. So what that means is you can scroll up and down the timeline and see all those shots there. And in some ways it's you can tell what other shots are available, they're just there, and then you can pick them. So let me show you if you go across here to the multi-view, I can show you how this works. Now this is designed to be a bit like a switcher workflow. So when you see the multi-view, that's actually similar to a multi-view that you'd see in a switcher. In many ways, we took the workflow from switches and put that in and made that the basis of the timeline. So we can just scroll on the timeline here and find alternative shots. And you can see it all in the multi-view there, and we can see all the different views that we have. So, you know, in many ways this makes editing pretty much like using a switcher. You know, the multi-view is very familiar, so you've seen it before. Now all we need to do in this multi-view is select a shot, and then we can use that shot. So, well, in this case, I've actually started this edit with a still frame up because it started up in input 4. So what I'll do is I'm going to replace the whole front of this instead of it being a still frame. You can see the red border around the shot that's actually active. I'll just go all the way to the start of the timeline, and I'll select this nice wide shot here instead. So let's select that. Now you can see what it's done is I've now selected that shot, so it's made it the focus, and it's put an in point in for me, which is over here, and it's put an out point in of about 4 seconds. Now that's just a convenient out point. You can move that around if you like, but I don't really want to do that. What I want to do is I want to move down the timeline, so maybe around about here, and I'll just push the O key. And what that'll do, because you can see that this view, the sync bin, is synchronized to the timeline. So I can set the in and out points just by scrolling along the timeline, but I'm setting the in and out points on the clip itself. I'm not actually really setting them on the timeline, of course. So now I've got my clip selected, and I'm going to be, what I really want to do now is take that clip and put it down on the timeline. Now I don't want to go down and try and work out how to synchronize that onto the timeline and exactly where to place it, because I don't want any AV sync issues. So what we have is we have a different kind of edit mode, which really makes this very powerful. Selecting the source is really only half the job. The other half is using the edit mode called source overwrite. Now I can show you where that is. Now what it does is it places this clip into a position in the timeline that's synchronized, and it does it for you. You don't need to put it in and out point on the timeline. It'll go and put it in the timeline for you, synchronized to the layers in the timeline. It ladders to the layer above. Now, so it does all the work for you. So let me show you where that edit mode is there. It's there. There's all my edit modes, and there's source override. Now all I need to do is push it, and it's done the work. It's placed that clip synchronized to the position in the timeline over the top, and now I've essentially replaced that edit. So it's pretty cool. Now what I can do is if I want to do another edit, I'll move back to where I was. I want to go at the end of that position. If I want to choose a different camera, say this one, I can do it. In this case I'll just do another source overwrite, and I can just keep adding different camera views and keep doing source overwrites and just keep adding cutaways. So it's really exciting. You can just add as many cutaways as you like. Now we think that in many ways you could just use this as a, like bloggers can just use this as a ATEM Mini Pro ISO as a multi-track recorder, and you can essentially just record all your angles. I think one of the things that bloggers have, you notice a lot of bloggers use single cameras. Well, if you use an ATEM Mini Pro ISO, you can use it as a multi-track video recorder and just record multiple angles, and they're all synchronized together, and you can use the sync bin and the source override feature to edit them later. So you can just put down a wide shot and a couple of different shots, and then use the sync bit, add cutaways for close-ups and camera angles of graphics and stuff, just like I've done here. And what that really does is avoid the jump cuts. I mean, a lot of blog guys have a lot of jump cuts in their edits, and it doesn't look really very professional. So hopefully, bloggers can use this to get rid of all that. And so it's really another good reason for editing a live event, doing your blog this way. Now, of course, the big thing is if you've got a live event that you've done like this, you might want to cut out mistakes. I think that's probably these are the big reasons why it's great to record like this. And again, that's pretty easy too. You can cut anything out. Let's go back to the timeline, and say if we want to sort of chop out a bit of this, there's a split tool over here, so you can just chop it and move over here and chop it, and you can just cut pieces out, and I'll do that. And that's another really powerful reason why it's great to be able to use editing software after you've done a live event, because you can replace shots, you can trim edits and move them around to get a different creative feel. You can chop pieces out, maybe something got a bit boring, you can chop that out. So it's really quite flexible. And of course, if you're bloggers, you can just use it as a multi-track recorder, because this is powerful, and this DaVinci Resolve connection and everything is really very powerful, and the cut page and all the features. But you don't have to use DaVinci Resolve. You can use any software if you like. These ISO files will work in any edit software. The files are all the same length. They've all got the same time code, and all the files are formatted in H.264 and very high quality. So any software with multicam will be able to use them. So you're not really limited to DaVinci, but you can see how powerful it is. Now, with DaVinci though, it takes it even further again. Now we haven't just done the project import, and that's very powerful in itself, but we're also the only company to have cinema cameras, switches and a major NLE in our product line. So what it means is we can develop some more advanced workflows because you can get some advantages of having all those connecting together. Remember that feature that we've got in the ATEM Mini Pro where you can record in the cameras? Now we have pocket cameras connected here, and we also have flash drives on them, so we can record in these cameras, and we can remote triggered when we record on the switches. So when we record on the switch, we can also remote trigger in the cameras. Now all the recordings are in Blackmagic RAW, so they're all cinematic film industry files. They're very high quality, and we can use these Blackmagic RAW files for the cameras in our edit. So let me show you how to do this, because it's kind of a little bit tricky, but it's kind of cool. So what I need to do is I need to set the menu. So let me come over here. I'll minimize DaVinci here. In fact, I'll close my project here. I'll get this out of the way. And I'll minimize DaVinci, so because I need to go back to my ATEM software settings. So here's my ATEM software control. Now I'll go back to my output palette and go back to my streaming settings. Now this is the checking here. I need to click on this to record on all the cameras. Now the other thing I need to do is change my project name. So like I mentioned before, like I've got a project name in here. Now remember before I mentioned that it had the append feature. If I leave the project name the same, it'll just keep appending to what I've got. So I need to change the project name to a new project. So I'll just call it that, and now it'll know to create a new project because I did a different file name. So let's do a recording. So I'll need to get my flash disk out of here so I can record to that. So let me just unplug that. I'll come across here. I'll plug it in. So now when I record, what it'll do is it should, now that I've got it selected, it'll record all the ISO files in here, and it'll also record in the cameras. So let's press record, and I can look at my cameras and see, yes, they're all recording. Now all my pocket cameras have flash drives on them, and they've all gone orange. The tally lights go orange when you're recording in the cameras. So there it is there. Now I can do some switching between the sources. There it is there. I'll do it fairly simple. So there's a quick recording, and I've switched between the cameras. Now as I was saying, the cameras got orange tally lights, but they still go red tally lights when they're on air, but they're orange when they're recording. So you can tell if any of your cameras stop recording and you're shooting yourself and you're recording in cameras, you can tell if they, I'll stop recording, you can tell if any of the camera discs fill because the orange light will go off. So now I've got my recording, and if our guys can bring over the flash drive, so I'll come over here and I'll plug in. So what I need to do now is I need to get all the files. So I need to take all the discs from the cameras and my local disk and record them all in this, copy them into the same file. So you can see I've got my new project folder over here. Now I'll copy that to the desktop because I want to go through the disks and copy the Blackmagic RAW files off as well. So that's already copied. So let's eject that, and I'll grab the disks. Thanks. So I'll get rid of that. So these are the flash drives from my cameras. So I've got to get each one of these files off. So all you need to do is I've got my ISO folder here. That's got my ISO files in it. So all you need to do is grab them. So here's my Blackmagic RAW file from the camera. So I'll just copy that across. That one's copied. So I'll have to do this to all of them, so if you bear with me for a sec, because I need to get each flash drive and copy it across. There it is. It's the second camera. Well, it's actually camera number 3. And my last camera there they are. So I'll move these discs away. So what I've got now is I've got in my media file, I've got all my Blackmagic RAW files from my cameras, and I've also got the folder that was created on here. So all I need to do now is open up my DaVinci Resolve project. I better switch back to DaVinci so I can load the project up, and there it is. So you can see this looks very similar to before. Of course, I did different edits. I did just a couple of dissolves and a few cuts here, so it's not really that complex. Oh, I've left my keyer on. So I've opened up my project, so I've got that all up now. I can see my project. As you can see, it's opened up all the ISO files. The color grades are applied. You know, it looks like a normal video edit, just like the last one that I did. But the thing is, we have a problem. Now that problem is that the Blackmagic RAW files in the switcher have the same timecode and the same camera numbers as the ISO files that were recorded in the switcher. So they clash. The ISO files will clash with the Blackmagic RAW files from the cameras. So DaVinci has a new feature that allows you to sort all that out, and it's called Camera Originals. So if you go up to the Camera Originals button up here, that lets you select that you want to use the Camera Original files. And so if you push that button, DaVinci will see if you've got a Blackmagic RAW file like a Camera Original, it'll then switch to that. So let me show you, there it is there, and so I'll push that. If I push that, you'll see now what it's done is it's switched over to the Blackmagic RAW files. Now you can see the other thing that's happened is they're all film gamma. So as you scroll along, you can see we've got film gamma files. That's because they're Blackmagic RAW files and they're film gamma. So what that means is you can professionally color grade them. Now I can go across to the color page now, and I can select my color corrections. I can I'll probably do a really bad job of color grading these, but I can come along here now and I've got a mix open there. I've got to push that. Whoops, not that. There it is. So I can then go across here and do some color grading and make them look nice. Now there's a ton of features in here. You know, it's nice to spend a lot of time color grading because you can, you've got all the time in the world if you spend time here. You know, if you're doing it live, you've only got the time to do it when you're live. But you can do a whole lot more time when you're color grading these files, and they're Blackmagic RAW, so they're really nice. The other thing too is you've got a lot more color grading features. I mean, if you look at the number of palettes and capabilities that we have in here, it's powerful, and you've got all sorts of secondaries and windows and stabilizers and all kinds of curve grading you can do as well. So it's kind of really very, very powerful. So, and of course you've got scopes, you can see the scopes, you can do all that sort of stuff as well. Now, normally when you're live streaming, you've got to use the camera color grades, and they're very, very good because they are a DaVinci color grader in the cameras. But the basics, it's not like anywhere near as extensive as this. Also, when you're live streaming, you've got to use the switcher's audio mixer. Now that's a really good switcher. It's a really good color grader in there, but there's nothing like the software. There's so much more power in software because you can just keep adding features. Plus, when you're doing post-production, it's quieter. It's more relaxed when you're doing post-production. You've got a lot of time. So you've got plenty of time to really get things absolutely finessed. So if you've got the time, I mean, you can do it really in two ways. You can finish the grade, use the ISO files, do a few edit trims and upload, or you can load the Camera Originals and spend a lot more time doing beautiful audio mixes and color grades and getting it looking really good. But the big thing that you can do, and this is what's really powerful about using the Blackmagic RAW files, is you can do a 4K edit. Blackmagic RAW files, these Blackmagic RAW files are 4K. So you can just change the edit over to Ultra HD. So what this means is you can finish a program in Ultra HD. So let me show you how that works. So if I go back to the cut page, up here, so I'll move along to my timeline. Up here I've got a resolution menu, so I can just change the edit to Ultra HD, and there it is. Now, all I have to do is do a quick export. You can see now the edit will be Ultra HD. I won't do that. Well, actually, I will do it. Let's do it. Let's export. Desktop. Now what it's doing is it's going back and getting all the Camera Originals, and all those Camera Original sources will be high resolution. Now any of the non-camera inputs will be automatically upscaled. So the graphic, unless you replace them of course, but the graphic and my computer source is a HD source and it doesn't have a Blackmagic RAW file with it because it's a computer, they'll be upscaled for you. So there it is there. So I can minimize DaVinci, come across, and there's my Ultra HD project. An incredible quality. Look at the quality of the pictures there because they're all Blackmagic RAW and Ultra HD. So what this is, the thing that makes this really exciting is this is how, it's a very powerful HD switcher, but this is how a powerful HD switcher can create an Ultra HD edit. You can stream in HD, then you can master in Ultra HD. So it's like the best of both worlds. It's really exciting, and you can see the quality there. It's just really wonderful. So now the ATEM Mini Pro ISO, it'll be available now. Its price will be $895. All of that I showed you here works with the free DaVinci Resolve. So you can just download the free DaVinci Resolve. So that means there's no extra cost to do the video editing. You don't have to go off and buy DaVinci Resolve. You can just use the free version. And we think this is a really powerful workflow. It's like a new model for really how, it's just extremely exciting. It's like a whole new way of doing production. So, this is a really powerful product. It's really exciting. It's it's in some ways, feature-wise, it's the most powerful switch we have. You get 5 broadcast recorders built in, so you don't have to spend thousands of dollars doing that externally. You get a multi-track audio recorder built in. It creates a DaVinci Resolve edit file, so it's going to save you thousands of hours of editing time. Imagine if you did a half-hour live production and you could do thousands of edits on the front panel that all load in. Now, after the live event, you can just do quick trims and tweaks and slip edits and things, replace some shots and get it uploaded fast. It allows you to fix mistakes in a live production, so make sure that the file you eventually upload, which is going to be there forever, is perfect. And then of course you can add professional audio mixing and color grading, and plus it allows a little HD switcher like this to create Ultra HD masters. So it's going to be very exciting. Now we have a new DaVinci Resolve update today. It's 16.2.5. That's the DaVinci Resolve update that will support loading in the project, so you need to update that. It adds support for the ATEM Mini Pro ISO project import, so you need to get that. There's also, we did some changes to the Blackmagic RAW recording in the cameras. There's just some metadata stuff we did. So you want to get the Blackmagic cameras 6.9.5, and that'll be available today as well. That'll be on the website. And that adds support for this syncing all the Blackmagic RAW files, because we did a little bit extra metadata. So it's not a big change, but if you're recording Blackmagic RAW on the cameras, you really want to get that update. There's also an ATEM Switches 8.4 update available today. Now that adds support for the new ATEM Mini Pro ISO model. Now if you've got an ATEM Mini Pro ISO, we actually just did an update last night, so you really want to make sure you get that update and run the Blackmagic, the ATEM utility software that comes with the ATEM software to update the switcher. So if you run that, it'll load the latest software into the switcher itself, because you might have got a switcher that had the slightly earlier version of the software. So you want to make sure your ATEM Mini Pro ISO's got the latest software that's on the website now. So you want to do that. Now one of the other things we did just before I finish up, we have actually added some other new features into the ATEM Mini Pro ISO as well. So I'll quickly mention them. Now this model can record video via the flash drives, just like our Hyperdeck recorders can. So what we did is we added some of the features that our Hyperdeck recorders have into the switcher. So we've added the FTP protocol. Now the FTP protocol is called File Transfer Protocol. It's a sort of a protocol that's been around for a long time. It's quite robust, but it's how you can actually download through the Ethernet files from the switcher. So if you've got a disconnected, like this flash drive's connected, if I plug that in, now what this switcher will let you do is remotely log in from anywhere in the world and actually access the files on that disk via the switcher through the Ethernet cable and through the internet or locally on the network. So you can download files from the disk. You probably wouldn't want to do it while you're recording a big ISO project, depending on the disk. If you've got a fast disk, it's okay, but if you've got a slower disk, you want to be a little cautious, but it does allow you to download the files, the video files, through the Ethernet link from the disk, just like a Hyperdeck can. The other thing we've done is we've added the Hyperdeck protocol, the control protocol, for recording. So what that means is you can use any Hyperdeck software that you can develop. You can control the recording features remotely as well. So that's pretty exciting. And the other thing is this switcher, if you look at it, there's kind of a router inside. You've got multiple sources, which are inputs, and you've got multiple internal destinations like the output, the preview output, the actual video output itself. So we've also added the Video Hub protocol. Now that's a text-based protocol, so you can try it out with Telnet if you want to experiment. But it means you can actually now also use some of our Video Hub hardware and software control panels to control the sources and destinations in this. So I can show you that quickly just before we finish up. I've got a software control panel over here, sorry, a hardware control panel. And you can see this is connected to the local network, which is the ATEM Mini Pro ISO is plugged into. So if I go destinations, I can change the output, then I can change the source, I can change that to say camera 1, and then I can scroll on there, or I can press it on here, of course. I can push camera 1, 2, and I can hit take, and now I've selected the video output of the ATEM Mini Pro ISO to camera 2 directly instead of the multi-view. Of course, I can come back over here and do the multi-view as well and switch it back. So essentially, this switching of the video output, I can do it over on the control panel. So I think that'll be really nice. I mean, there's developers that love making custom solutions. You never know what people are going to come up with. Now they'll be able to create, especially if you're doing the same kind of job all the time, you might be able to create a custom solution for recording and control. You could even do a web interface or something like that. So there's, you can make the ATEM Mini Pro a little bit more specialized for certain types of work, which can be really nice. And we love doing that because we never quite know what people are going to do. People do all kinds of interesting workflows and you never really quite know. So the trick for us is to make as much powerful features as possible available, and then people can have the freedom to do what they want. So currently these features are only in the ATEM Mini Pro ISO model, but of course we want to copy them back to the Pro model when we get a chance pretty soon, hopefully. So, but I think initially we'll be focused on making sure that there's a few more workflow things we'd like to do on this as well, so it's going to be exciting. So that's all I have today. I hope you found all these updates useful. I think it's really going to be exciting to see how this works, and I hope the these new products help your production work. It'll be exciting to see how everyone integrates this with live production and editing, sort of two slightly different worlds sort of being brought together. I think it'll be fun to see how it works. I think it's going to save thousands of hours of work and really allow live production to be just as professional, like just as finely finished as what editing can do, but it's fast because it's live production. So I think it's the best of both worlds. So again, hopefully we'll see you around soon, and stay safe, and thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.